The boardroom froze as I clicked to the final slide of my presentation. The new budget numbers glared from the screen, and I watched Karen's smug confidence crumble into raw horror. Her manicured nails dug into the conference table as she processed the $5,000 hike in HOA fees, staring back at her. "What is this?" she screeched, her voice climbing higher with every word. "Who authorized this outrageous increase? This is absolutely unacceptable." I straightened my tie, savoring the moment I had orchestrated for weeks. "You did, Karen," I replied with a calm smile. "The second you fined me $1,000 for swimming in my own lake." Let me rewind and explain how it all began. My name is David, and I've lived in Willow Creek Estates for 15 years. When I bought my property, it wasn't the 4-bedroom colonial or the 3-car garage that sealed the deal. It was the pristine 20-acre lake included with the deed. Crystal Lake, as the original owners named it, lies partly on my property and partly bordering the HOA grounds. For over a decade, this worked beautifully. Neighbors would wave as I swam in the mornings, and sometimes I even allowed the HOA to host summer picnics on my section of the shoreline. Then Karen became HOA president. You know the type. She walked into her first board meeting with a leather-bound notebook, color-coded tabs, and a mission to impose order. Within a month, she had mailed out 17 warning letters for infractions, ranging from mailboxes being 2 inches too tall to lawns a half-inch too long. She actually carried a ruler in her purse. Trouble began on a bright Saturday in June. I was mid-swim, floating on my back and watching clouds drift, when I heard that unmistakable shriek. "Excuse me! Excuse me, sir!" Karen stood at the shore, in her HOA president blazer, despite the 90-degree heat, waving a clipboard like a battle flag. "You must exit the water immediately." I swam closer, though not too close. Something told me she might attempt a citizen's arrest with that clipboard. "Good morning, Karen. Beautiful day for a swim." "Swimming is strictly prohibited in community waters," she announced, reading directly from her notes. HOA Regulation 7.3.9 clearly states all recreational water use requires board approval and proper insurance. I treaded water, baffled. "This is my lake, Karen. I own it. Check the property records." She adjusted her oversized sunglasses, the kind that scream, "I need to speak to your manager," from a mile away. "The HOA governs all shared natural spaces inside our boundaries. This lake borders HOA land. Therefore, it falls under our authority." "That's not how property law works," I said, swimming back toward my dock. "We'll see what our lawyers say," she shouted. "Consider yourself on notice." I thought that would end it. Surely, once she checked the property lines, she'd see her mistake. But I underestimated both her stubbornness and her ability to bend reality to her will. The certified letter landed the next Monday. Official HOA letterhead. It accused me of violating community standards and imposed a $1,000 fine for unauthorized use of community resources. 3 pages long, it cited fabricated regulations and threatened legal action if I continued recklessly endangering community safety. I tried reason first. I photocopied my deed, highlighted sections proving my lake ownership, included the 1952 survey, water rights, and even a letter from the former HOA president confirming it was private. I hand-delivered everything to Karen's door. She opened it in yet another blazer, this one pink, as though she had a wardrobe dedicated solely to HOA authority. "David," she said, refusing even to glance at my documents, "the fine stands. The board has spoken." "The board?" I asked. "When did the board meet about this?" "Emergency session," she announced with a smile that never touched her eyes. "We take safety violations very seriously." Later, I learned this so-called emergency session consisted of Karen and her 2 closest allies camped out at Starbucks. The letters didn't stop. She sent one nearly every day, each more hostile than the last. She even filed complaints with the city, insisting I was creating an attractive nuisance. Soon, she'd started a whisper campaign, telling anyone, within earshot, that I was setting a dangerous precedent. Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down even asked if it was true I was planning to open an unlicensed water park. That was when I decided enough was enough. It was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. For the next 2 weeks, I buried myself in HOA documents, bylaws, contracts, agreements spanning back 30 years. And then I found it. The smoking gun, an easement agreement from 1998 granting the HOA permission to use a section of my property for maintenance access to their side of the lake. It included rights to the small beach where they hosted community events and the gravel road their trucks relied on. The catch? The agreement expired after 25 years unless formally renewed. It was now 2024. Nobody had bothered to renew it. I double-checked everything with my lawyer, who actually laughed when I explained the situation. So, she's fining you for using your own property while her organization is technically trespassing on it? He said. This is going to be fun. I waited until the next HOA board meeting to drop the bomb. These meetings were Karen's pride and joy. She ran them like congressional hearings, complete with a gavel she'd bought on Amazon and rigid Robert's Rules of Order. I signed up for the public comment period and waited. When she finally called my name, her voice dripping with disdain, I stood with my own leather folder. 2 could play the official documentation game. Thank you, Madam President, I began, mirroring her formal tone. I'm here to address the expiration of the easement agreement between the HOA and my property. The room went silent. Karen's gavel hand twitched. As you may or may not be aware, I continued, handing copies to each board member, the HOA's legal access to the northern section of Crystal Lake, including the beach and maintenance road, expired 6 months ago. I've tolerated the trespassing, but given recent events, I feel it's time for a new arrangement. Karen's face cycled from red to white to a shade of purple I didn't know humans could turn. This is ridiculous, she sputtered. We've used that access for decades. Without legal authorization for the past 6 months, I clarified. My attorney has drafted a new lease agreement. The terms are quite reasonable. Continued access for the low annual fee of... I paused, letting the tension rise. $5,000. The audience gasped. Someone's coffee cup clattered to the floor. $5,000? Karen shrieked, abandoning her precious Robert's Rules. That's extortion! That's market rate for lakefront access, I replied calmly. 3 commercial real estate agents provided comps. If anything, I'm giving you a discount. Of course, you're free to decline and lose access entirely. I'm sure the community would understand losing their beach and having to drive 4 extra miles around the lake for maintenance. The board members erupted into frantic whispers. Tom Bradley, the treasurer, was already pulling up budget spreadsheets on his laptop. Karen, meanwhile, looked on the verge of a stroke. You can't do this, she hissed. Actually, I can, I said, sliding the lease agreement across the table. You have 30 days to decide, I said. After that, I'll be installing a gate. The next 3 weeks were glorious chaos. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The same people who had avoided me after Karen's smear campaign suddenly had very strong opinions about fiscal responsibility and board overreach. The Facebook group exploded with demands for emergency budget meetings and cries for accountability. Karen tried everything. She sent cease and desist letters her lawyer probably charged a fortune for, only to be told they had no legal weight. She argued historical use rights but had no documentation. She even tried to drag the city in, but they wisely stayed out of a civil property fight. Finally, with 2 days left before my deadline and facing a full-scale resident revolt, the board called an emergency meeting, an actual one this time, not a Starbucks coffee clutch. The community center was packed. People stood in the aisles. Someone even set up a live stream for those who couldn't attend. Karen sat at the head table, her usual blazer replaced with a severe black suit that made her look like she was at her own funeral, which professionally she was. The vote was swift and unanimous with 1 abstention. Karen, of course, voted no, but she was outnumbered 4-1. The lease was approved, the budget adjusted, and everyone's HOA fees went up to cover the new cost. The aftermath was sweeter than victory. The same keyboard warriors who had cheered Karen's every petty rule now turned their fury on her. The Facebook group lit up with breakdowns of how her vendetta had cost each household an extra $160 per year. Someone even made a meme of her face on the Titanic with the caption, "I'll never let go of my clipboard." At the next meeting, resident after resident lined up to voice disappointment in the board's leadership. Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher who hadn't spoken in a decade, gave a devastating speech about fiscal responsibility and unchecked power. She ended with, "Perhaps some board members should consider whether they're truly serving the community's best interests." The recall petition started that night. Within a week, it had enough signatures to trigger a special election. Karen tried to rally support, but raising everyone's fees over a personal grudge turned out to be the fastest way to lose allies. I timed my next swim for the morning of the recall vote. Floating on my back, I could see Karen's car in the community center lot. She'd arrived at 6 a.m. to campaign, setting up a table with cookies and flyers defending her record. By noon, the cookies were untouched and she was standing alone. That evening, the results came in. Karen was removed by a margin of 87%, the largest in HOA history. As the numbers were read, she stood clutching her leather notebook like armor. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "I was only trying to maintain standards. You'll regret this when property values plummet." Someone in the back laughed. Karen's face fell. She grabbed her giant purse and measuring ruler, storming out as her heels clicked on the linoleum like a countdown to exile. The new board sent me a formal apology the following week, along with a check refunding my $1,000 fine plus interest. They proposed a renegotiated lease at a modest $500 a year, with a promise of mutual respect and cooperation going forward. I accepted immediately. To celebrate, I put up a new sign at the lake entrance. In large, friendly letters, it read, "Private property, swim free." Beneath that, in small print only visible up close, "HOA leadership not welcome." Last I heard, Karen listed her house for sale. The realtor mentioned she'd taken a job 3 counties over, where presumably no one knew about the Crystal Lake incident. I like to think there's an HOA board out there with no clue what's coming. As for me, I still swim every morning. Sometimes I float on my back and think about that day in the boardroom when I presented the $5,000 increase. The look on Karen's face was worth every penny in legal fees and research time. She learned the hard way that the smallest power can corrupt absolutely, and that swimming in your own lake isn't a crime, no matter what her clipboard says.